Life might look steady on paper with your work, your family, the routine of day to day life, and all the while, the names of those that we've lost are sticking out loud in the back of our minds, especially around the holidays. Sometimes, especially around the holidays, we need a little help, a little camaraderie, folks to be around with us. Today, I'm going to be talking with Rich Brown, a Marine Corps veteran who turned entrepreneur, who was pulled out of the Marine Corps by a TBI and pushed into entrepreneurship. He started a security company. He's a co-owner of Honorbound Fitness gym, and he helped launch a nonprofit that is built around hard miles, heavy rucks, and even heavier talks about veteran and first responder suicide. In this episode, we're going to talk about how this nonprofit Guidon 22 works, how they share stories of those who lost someone to suicide, and why staying silent about your pain oftentimes is the worst thing that you could be doing. Before we get into this episode, though, I do want to take a moment to raise awareness for something that's deeply important to our community, the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation. This organization is working to build a permanent national memorial in Washington, D.C. to honor the service members, families, and civilians who were impacted by the global war on terrorism. This memorial will be both a tribute to those who served and will serve as a way to ensure that their sacrifices are recognized and remembered for generations to come. If you'd like to learn more or find out how you can support their mission, visit gwatmemorialfoundation.org. Now let's get into today's episode. Hey, Rich, welcome to the show. Really glad to have you here.
I appreciate you having me, man. It's an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a chance to meet up at MIC a couple months ago, and that was really cool because all the time that I get to chat with somebody in person before having them on the show, it's usually the other way around, if at all. Like if I am in person, it's usually after the fact.
You're the only podcast host or anyone that I had met virtually, right? That I had something scheduled with that I did at a conference before our scheduled recording. So it was a fun interaction.
Yeah, it was cool, and the conference in general, I thought was great. It was plenty of awesome people there, and yourself and your folks included, and I think it was just a great opportunity there. So, the listeners who maybe don't know about you and your background and stuff, can you tell us a little bit military background and kind of how you got into your doing today?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon and Montana. I enlisted in the Marine Corps the day after my 17th birthday, 4 days after high school graduated. And I spent 3.5 years in the combat arms with 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines, doing Afghanistan and Iraq and all that, and leading troops in combat, living the time of my life. And then I taught at Quantico for 4.5 years at the basic school, teaching young lieutenants. And then I started a private security company, and from there, I've rolled that into other business ventures. And now I co-own a gym and a nonprofit, and yeah, that's the quick down and dirty synopsis.
And in between all of that, you found time to come on the show and chat with me, and that's awesome. So
happy to be here, man. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it sounds like all the lieutenants getting lost in the woods probably have something. They're probably pointing at you and blaming you for getting lost.
Anybody but themselves, sure. I got really good. One of the things that me and my co-owner, we also have a podcast, or we've started a couple podcasts. One of the questions that we frequently ask is like, what's something that most people don't think about, or that surprised you that you learned from the military that you use now in your current ventures and stuff like that? And one of them is precision in language. If teaching college graduates who want to be officers in the Marine Corps taught me anything, it's to say exactly what you mean, and that it's not what you say so much as what's heard. And if it can be misinterpreted, it's your fault, right?
Yeah.
You have 320 lieutenants sitting in a classroom, and if one of them can misunderstand what you said and they get it wrong on the test, they're going to let you know it was your fault they got it wrong real quick.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And the military has definitely taught me that for sure, but nothing has reinforced it more post-military than teaching my son how to drive. When you're sitting in the passenger seat and he's in the driver's seat,
Struggle.
you're giving him an instruction,
Hmm.
but sometimes if he doesn't wait for the full instruction to leave your mouth and he goes and starts going someplace, it's like, oh shit, no,
Yeah,
you can't
yeah,
do
yeah.
that. So
I remember being. I think I was a teenager reading about neurolinguistic programming and something about when you say, don't touch the stove is part of still too much of the sentence to have the effects you
right.
want, right?
Yeah, you definitely start choosing your words a lot more carefully when you have
Yeah,
absolutely zero control over whether you live or die through that experience.
I love her
um,
to death, but I think my 17-year-old daughter is probably one of the only people I've ever met who gets worse with practice. She still doesn't have her driver's license. We talk about it frequently.
that's awesome. Um, so you have so you talked about to run Honor Bound Fit, I think is the gym that you have. Tell us about that, where that kind of came from after
Yeah,
Marine
so
Corps.
about 2.5, 3 years ago, very close friend teaching at Quantico, and we've become heterosexual life partners ever since. His dream has always been to open a gym. We did CrossFit together. My Marine Corps career in the middle of his or whatever, and he wanted to be a CrossFit instructor. He was a CrossFit instructor, but he wanted to open his own gym. He went overseas, did military contracting, and put away some money, and then his ex-wife spent it all before he got. You've heard this story before, right?
Oh
So
yeah. Yep.
when they started going through their separation/divorce, he looked like he was struggling to find purpose. I said, "When are we going to open your gym, bud?" And he kind of hemmed and hawed for a little bit, and then I asked him again, and he said, "Well, maybe we could do it by 4th of July." And our local Black Rifle Coffee and the manager there was looking for someone. He was wearing a CrossFit hoodie at the time, and she said, "Well, I'd love to reach out to your gym, etc." He said, "Funny story, we're starting the gym." And so I had asked him, why couldn't we do it by 4th of July? And he said, then he came back to me and said, "I think we could do it by Memorial Day." And so we launched Honor Bound Fit in the parking lot of a Black Rifle company on Memorial Day, 2024, and started working out in parking lots and churches and so on, and then we were in our space by September, and it's been full speed ahead ever since.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and especially when you have a business that you're just starting off, maybe money's a little tight, you kind of bootstrapping it. I don't know what your situation is, but I know a lot of folks starting a business, money might be a little tight, and um, when you can start off without the commitment of renting a space or a building and all that financial commitment that goes into that, and you can do it in a park or other places like that, the overhead low, and still be able to test out the concept. Do you even have the market that you thought you had, and all that
Right.
kind of stuff? That seems like a pretty smart way to get it started, and then after a couple months, this actually might be something. And
Well, and
then
with this type of industry, you have to get in where you fit in, so to speak. Like we had
sure.
the opportunity, started basically spring, beginning of summer, right? But it snows here, so we're not going to be doing burpees in a snowy parking lot, probably,
Right.
right? We might, but our members might, you know, turn away,
Sure.
and
Sure.
so we kind of got forced by the seasons into you either make this work or try it again next year, right? That's why
Right. Right.
September we were like, all right, we found a space.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So so you have that going on, and then you also mentioned a nonprofit that
So
you're
one
working with
form
as
from the
well.
other, right? So
Okay.
let's go back to the start. So I had about 3 years left in the Marine Corps when I was diagnosed with TBI. They said, look, that thing you love doing, leading troops in combat, that you find all that purpose and value in, you're never going to do that again. You're not competent enough. But they said, we're going to let you finish out your contract teaching, but we're not going to let you reenlist fleet and lead troops in combat.
Hmm.
And so it was a kick to the balls, right? To be
Yeah.
told, hey, you're never going to do that again, right? That thing that you identify as. But I had some time to figure it out. And so about a year later, I started my first company. And I've been able to kind of snowball that over the years. And one of my favorite quotes I've heard recently is success like it's a ladder, that you have to climb the ladder to success. It looks so much more like an obstacle course in reality, right? You,
Right.
you, you go up one ladder to go down a slide and across a trench and so on. and you have to know when to get off certain obstacles. And so, I started one business. It was acquired by another company. I was with that company for a while, and then I left it to start a new company. And all that to say that I own a private security company, and it's doing okay, right? But the industry is kind of broken, but it pays the bills, right? You talked
Sure.
about bootstrapping the business with no money or whatever. And the truth is, the co-founder Keith and I, we put a lot in the gym to keep it afloat and to keep it going today, right? We're still not quite in the black yet. But we can say, I'm a business geek, and so I'm very aware that 93% of of gyms don't make it out of their first year, and so we're honored to be in the 7% club.
Yeah.
But it's still a challenge, right? So my his full time job, it floats the business for now. I have my security company. We co-own the gym, and then as part of the gym, I'm a big fan of Michael Easter, and he talks about rucking a lot. I wanted to get members into rucking, and so we started doing these monthly ruck events, something to work towards. And so I said, hey, veteran suicide is at a time high in the fall and winter during the holiday seasons between Thanksgiving and years. So let's work up to 22 miles, and we'll make a big event out of 22 miles with 22 pounds. And so that's what we did. December 22nd, 2024 was our first ruck for veteran suicide awareness. We kind of rolled that this year into now it's a bigger event called Guide on 22, and we got a lot of attention for it. We had a lot more people come in to help us with it, and now we just finished Guide on 22 for this year on November 22nd. And forward, it's always going to be the Saturday before Thanksgiving. But now it's turning into its own nonprofit, and so we're filing all the paperwork. Nonprofit, the Guide on Foundation, and its keystone event for the year is Guide on 22. And hopefully in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to have Guide on 22 East and Guide on 22 West and Guide on 22 Houston, and who knows,
And in a city near you, right?
Yeah, we'll see.
Um, so these events, the rucking events. So you're bringing people going rucking. Now everyone going the full 22 miles themselves, or is it a type thing? How does that
Yeah, so
get
I've had
structured?
a lot of questions about, well, can we do it virtually, or can we do, I'm not going to tell you can't go for a walk, right? we did have
Right.
somebody who we have somebody who so one of the things that we do as part of the event is about every 3 miles we stop, let everybody hydrate, have snacks, fix their gear, take a load off for 5-10 minutes, and then we start every next leg with a story from a family member or a close friend of a veteran or first responder who's taken their own life.
Hmm.
So we had Nat Martin come up from Atlanta, Georgia. I met her at Mick. We had her friend Therese come from San Francisco, California, and she flew out here for it. But they had a friend didn't make it up, and she walked 22 miles around her neighborhood. I tell you can't, but what I can tell you is that it's not going to be the same experience, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
even had somebody earlier this year say, well, can you do it around a track? Like, you want to do 88 laps around a track? I would probably be the next veteran to commit suicide. Like, I'm not doing that. That's insane.
That's a lot of laps and
Yeah,
looking at the
I'd
same
lose
scenery
my
over and over. Yeah. Yeah.
mind. I don't like doing
Um,
out and back. I don't like walking to a point and then turn around halfway and be like, oh, look, it's the same thing from the other side. Right.
right.
So
It's just the
we put a lot
backside of
of
that.
we put a lot of planning into the route and making sure that it's interesting and not, the same
Oh,
thing
that's
over and over again. I
yeah.
think a
No,
high
that is
school
good.
track would probably ruin
Yeah,
it.
that would be a little rough doing it all on a track like that. I know there are some events that do use a track. I know, like when I was in high school, there was something for I don't know, I think the American Heart Association or something like that. They did
Yeah,
some
a
sort of thing
5K,
like
12 laps. That's, whatever.
that's not a big deal, right? Exactly. Yeah, what do you say? 88 laps on a track
88
that would
laps, 22 miles. Yeah.
be a lot.
No, I'm not
So
doing
uh, yeah, so what has the response been to these events as you've had probably more and more people joining
Yeah.
these events and checking it out? What has the reception been from these folks?
So the first year it was about 35 participants and mostly our gym members, almost entirely our gym members. And I read all the stories at each checkpoint, and it was a great event. Got a lot of great feedback. This year, we only had about 15 more participants than we did last year, but we had guests of honor come out from around the country. So each story was told from a different perspective, from a different person, etc. We had a lot more community involvement. And for that reason, I mean, like I said, it was 15 more people. I think we had 48 people we started with, and it felt so much bigger. You talk about quality and quantity. The quality made it feel like more quantity, is like probably the best way to put it, right?
Sure. Sure.
Um, the the response has been overwhelming. To answer your question more directly, extremely positive response. The guests of honor, I was worried. I had dinner the night before because I wanted them to feel like they, um, were valued and that we appreciated the fact that they traveled all this way. And the response we got the day of and the day after has just been incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And hearing the stories directly from the people who are impacted by this, I think, not to knock you and how you did it that first year, but
Yeah, no,
coming
no,
from one person who it
absolutely.
isn't necessarily associated with those people, um, it gets the point across, but I think it's a little bit more of those folks who are able to speak to it from a personal experience
Absolutely.
and give their own perspective on how did this affect us and our family and in our situation. Uh, it can be a lot more moving. I've done some longer rucks in my military days. I haven't really done much of that post military, but I've done longer runs and things like that, more kind of like endurance type things. And I know every time I'm getting to that point where I'm just like, man, I'm ready to just call it quits and call an Uber and take it back home, like that type of thing. I The thought that crosses my mind is, what about all those people who are not here
Yeah,
anymore who can't do this? I can do this, and I'm sitting here bitching about it because my feet are a little sore. Like, so what? Like, keep moving. Those
yeah,
people can't do it, and I can. I damn well better do it.
right.
So then you hear stories like this. The reason why I bring that up is you hear stories from folks, and it's like that had to be pretty damn motivating to get people out and out of their own head and say, you know what, the hell with the pain and the uncomfortable feeling I might be having right now. I'm going to keep pushing forward. You know.
It's exact, and there's catharsis in the pain, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you start the event with a person in mind, someone that you've lost or so on. Um, there's certainly a lot of catharsis in that pain. But yeah, we tell people we want everyone who gives a shit to make an effort and to try. There's absolutely no shame. We have 3 vehicles that are traveling with us the entire, throughout the entire route. You're more than welcome at any point to drop your pack or get in a vehicle. We'll get you back to line. We'll let you get back in wherever you want, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
But most of the people who did this event with us, they probably don't have a background in rucking. Some of them don't have a military background at all. And we started with 48 and finished with 41. So we lost, I think, less than 15%. And we tell them, like, look, there's absolutely no shame whatsoever in getting
Yeah.
in the vehicle. And yet, because the stories are so powerful, because the theme is don't quit, right? And all that goes on with that, typically the people who do end up having to get in a vehicle because they just can't walk on their feet anymore, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, they're living in their own kind of like just feeling it. You know what I mean? And
Right.
so, we try the best we can to kind of comfort them and there's always next year.
Yeah.
You
Sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And it's not that they're giving up necessarily, like they're quitting because they just don't feel like doing it anymore. It's I mean, at some point our bodies can only do so much, and
yeah,
if you're not used to rucking and you haven't maybe ever done any kind of rucking, I remember the first time doing any sort of rucking, I was like, who are these psychos who throw this kind of stuff on their back and go and do this kind of stuff?
so I said that each leg is about 3 miles, right? It's
Yeah.
anywhere from 3 to 5. It's typically about 3 because it's about every hour because we're moving at a 3 mile an hour pace.
Okay.
And all this is planned out in the very beginning. But we start with a silent mile. And so from our start location to the first main, nobody's talking, there's no music playing. And we ask you, just think about why we're here, think about those you've lost, et cetera, et cetera. And then after that silent mile, that's our chance to say, hey, look, if it's uncomfortable now, right? My foot was slipping around in my shoe a little bit. My pack is rubbing on my shoulder the wrong way, etc. If it's discomfort now, turns into pain later. So take this opportunity to adjust your gear, figure out what it is, because once you get a blister, the size of a nickel on your foot or whatever, and you start changing your gait, now you're working muscles you don't normally work in that way, and you go another 5, 10, 15 miles walking in a way you're not used to walking, and it's going to hurt real bad by the end of the day.
That's right. That's right. But ultimately, the whole goal of this is raising awareness for veteran suicides,
Yep.
and which, like you said, we have just an incredibly high number of people committing suicide, and it's important that not only just raise awareness of the issue, because I think a lot of people we've heard the 22 a day, and whatever the number actually is it is what it is, but we're aware of that number. I think the awareness piece gets deeper with those stories, because when you're talking to somebody about a broad general term like the 22 a day or something like that, those are all nameless, faceless. It's just a number, statistic. It's not personal. But then when you say, you know, Joe, and you put a name to the person, and you say whoever that person is, and who they were, maybe a husband or a father or a whoever, um then it becomes a little bit more personal, and especially when you're hearing it directly from a person, a spouse, or a parent, or whoever. Those people, now you put a name to number, and now that name actually means something, and it's not just a statistic anymore. It's now personal. And when you start seeing how it affects these people, these families, these loved ones, if that's something that's the back of somebody's mind, those dark thoughts that they're thinking about, kind of going that route themselves, maybe that's just enough to make them say, hey, you know what, I have some of those people in my life too, care about me, my loved ones, and I don't want to do that to them.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just the thing that they need to hear, or just that thing. And when you're going through a ruck like that, you got plenty of time to think, and you can mull over these things, and hopefully that's leading them to that decision to say, what, it'd be great right now, but I'm gonna stick around, I'm gonna fight, just like I'm fighting through this ruck. I'm gonna keep fighting for those people, if nothing else.
Yeah. And I'm not certainly not the one to be shaming those we've lost in any way. I talk to my brothers, when I talk to people who are in that space, and I tell them, it hurts, right? You're dealing with a certain amount of pain, self worth, whatever. You're carrying that pain, right? But if you're a veteran, a first responder, etc., you're used to a certain amount of pain. And maybe the pain is becoming unbearable, but the last thing you want to do is pass that pain on to your mother, your children, your friends, because that's all you're doing. It doesn't go
Yeah.
away. It's like energy, it just moves into something else.
Right.
So, you know,
Yeah.
it feels a bit selfish to me. And like I said, I'm not here to shame anybody we've lost, but I think it's a selfish decision to give up that pain and just let others carry it for you. It hurts.
Right. And that's exactly it. Somebody else is going to be the recipient of that pain. And, like, I don't know, I don't want anyone taking my burden on like that, and having to now carry it on top of their own stuff. Like, let me handle it. And yeah, sure, get the help when you need it. But necessarily just transfer it all over to somebody that
Exactly.
And it's more than just that, because it's whatever that pain was that you were experiencing, that you were suffering through, that pain goes then to every single one of those people. It's not like it, like, percent goes to this person and 10% goes to that person, or whatever. It's 100% plus some probably going on to every single one of those loved ones. So you're piling that on top of all the things that they're already going through in their lives, and I mean,
The
it's a lot.
the other, I think, hard part of it, and so we have 14 core values on the wall in our gym, and we try to embody them, we try to live by them, and we certainly use them to affect the way we run our business. But one of them is good friends have hard conversations.
Yeah.
And when you didn't family the opportunity to have that conversation with you, you're not doing anybody any favors, right? Um, a recurring theme that I hear over and over again when we invite people out is, I had no idea, right? A
Yeah.
lot of times, we know somebody's dealing with something, but we had no idea it was that bad
Hmm.
because they won't share it with us,
Yeah.
and that's again, it's not doing anybody any favors.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. There's somebody I know who, unfortunately, took their own life, and I talked to somebody, a friend of theirs, who had seen them just a day or two earlier, and said, "I had no idea. I had no idea something was going on. That it was that whatever it was this bad, or even that there was anything going on. I just had no idea." And you keep that kind of stuff hidden, and you bury it down so much, and you don't allow those other people to help you. I mean, think about anybody that you consider a friend or a loved one, or something like that. If any one of those came to you and said, "Hey, I'm really struggling with something right now," would the first thought that crossed your mind be like, "Oh my god, I got to go deal with this," or would it be like, "Well, let's figure it out"? Like, um, obviously you're gonna want to try to figure that out. And I think the opposite is true too, same for you. And so that I think is the kind of message I want to get across to folks, is that uh, you can't expect to be able to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders 100%, and never allow anybody else to help. Because like, if like, I feel like I'm not doing my job if I'm not able to help somebody. But if somebody doesn't tell me that there's something wrong, I can't do it. I don't know what even to do. I can't start addressing a problem I don't even know exists. So open up, tell somebody, talk to them.
Exactly.
So
In a way, it's almost like we use the phrase that excuses are lies that you tell yourself. When you don't tell people, when you don't share with your friends and family in ways that you are, or whatever, it's sort of like lying to them. And because
yeah,
when you lie to somebody, you deny them the opportunity to make an informed choice, right?
yeah,
And when you don't tell friends and family, when you don't seek help, you're denying anyone the opportunity to really try to make an effort.
that's right. Yeah. And I have uh another quote related to excuses. Excuses are like, and so I mean, if you think about it, though, like, in all seriousness, like, it's just an excuse, and it isn't a good one. It's not a good reason to not get help. It's not a good reason to keep this all bottled up inside. So
Right.
we try to protect those around us as much as we can. I know a lot of folks, especially folks who either are currently or were in the military. That's just part of our DNA, part of the culture that we came up in. And like, our job is to protect people, and that's the way we see it. Um, but at some point, you got to be able to pass it over, and some help with something. You don't. You were talking about how you love to lead troops in combat. That required other troops to be able to do something like that. That wasn't you just walking outside the wire, going kicking indoors yourself, like a Rambo or something. Like,
I had a conversation with somebody about that on the ruck, right? So
yeah,
Nat Martin, the one that I mentioned, came up from Atlanta. She's a retired master sergeant, and she, on her office wall, she was a career recruiter for like 10 years. And she wrote something on her office wall that said, the mission is people first.
yeah,
And somebody called her out and said, that's not our mission. And she said, well, for me, it is. Right. And it reminded me of Marine Corps troop leading steps, and we talk about you know mission one is accomplish the mission, and then your second welfare. But we talk about it like those that's a precedence, right? Like that
Mhm.
you have to accomplish the mission and then worry about troop welfare. But the reality is it's a cycle. If you don't take care of your troops, you're not going to have troops to win the mission. You know what I'm saying?
Right. No, absolutely. And similarly, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to take care of those around you. So, uh, just going back to the veteran suicide, topic that we're discussing, when you you have other ones around and you want nothing but the best for them. You want them to be, happy and healthy and taken care of and protected and safe and all those things. Well, if you're not taking care of you, you're not going to be able to take care of them, and you're not going to be able to provide those things for them. So you kind of have to take a step back. And to a lot of us, it seems like it's selfish to take time for yourself and work on your. It's not. It's the opposite. It's actually when you go and don't take care of yourself and it gets so bad that you end up doing something like what we've been talking about. That's when it becomes the selfish thing, like what you were talking about just a couple minutes ago, so. But when you get these groups of people together, to do these types of rucks, um, what are some stations like amongst the people? As if you're walking, talked about that one conversation that you just had, but um, are they talking about their own experiences that they've had, be veteran suicide, or are you forming new connections and new people, kind of, just talking about sports or other activities that they're into? What are kind of like the mile to mile, like what are people talking
Yeah,
about just to get into it?
I'm at a bit of a disadvantage because I lead the event and I
Ah,
lead from the front because I know where we're going and when we need to be there, right? I'm setting
sure.
the pace and all the things. And so one thing we did differently this year is I usually carry a flag, an American flag at the front of the ruck. I made the choice this time that after the silent mile, I was going to pass it off to somebody and they had to pass it off after I got to talk to somebody new every leg, right? Because I had a new volunteer carrying the flag. So I had, 7 or 8 people that were walking right next to me throughout the ruck. The conversations, they range. A lot of it's just, hey, how'd you hear about us? What brought you out? So on and so forth. Talking about their background and just getting to know the person. But the conversations certainly they vary from person to person. Individual results may vary.
Sure. Sure.
Some tendency to dominate a conversation and they have one thing they want to talk about, right?
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of it, and one of the things I said at the end of the day was, like, you very likely met somebody cool today. Make sure that you exchange contact info and
Yeah.
follow up with them. Develop this relationship because it is an opportunity to meet new cool people who have same type of values you do, etc. A lot of it is fun banter and cracking jokes and having a good time. Use that 3 mile checkpoint every time to kind of remind everybody of why we're there. Yeah, like assholes, right? But no, most of the time it's just getting to know people, having a good
Yeah.
time, making jokes, a
Cool. Cool. And
little bit of business networking, I think.
well, hey, and that's always good too. Yeah, I mean, and that's a
Yeah.
cool thing. You never know when an opportunity that with someone that you met, like at Mick. That's part of the reason why I even go to conferences like that, is because you never know who you're going to meet, and the folks that you do meet, it may not be an immediate connection where you jump right into a new role, or find a customer or some other business type relationship right away, but you form those relationships, and then somewhere down the line maybe that works into something big. So it's worked that way for me several times in the past, and that's why I'm going to these types of things. Now, you mentioned the Guidon 22 event was the weekend. Are there events throughout the year that you
Oh
guys
yeah.
have coming up or
So
planned or anything that you want?
got on 22, and especially because we're in Virginia, right outside of Quantico, and so we do get snow and ice, and we're not trying to injure people. We've been doing this for a year and a half, haven't had a serious injury yet. I say serious because so one of the things we do 2 big charity events every year. One is Guide on 22. The other one is what we call a food bank ruck. That's going to be April 11th this year. But the idea is it's a food drive, like any other food drive. You gather food, you want to donate to the food. Difference is we organize people, or we let people organize their own teams up to about 10 people. And any food that you want to donate, you have to put it in a pack and carry it 3 miles over a designated course. But the team who donates the most pounds of food in 12 hours wins $1,000 and a trophy and bragging rights and all the things, right? So it's an athletic event. You are rucking. You can go at your own pace for this one. It's the only event we do that you can go at your own pace. And a lot of these guys are trotting it out. And so the last 2 years that we've done the food bank ruck, there's always somebody that I hear back, and they were probably wearing Chuck Taylors like an idiot, but they say I lost both of my big toenails. I keep hearing that one over and over again. So that's the most serious injury we've had is guys lose their toenails because they wear the wrong shoes and they damn near run with a backpack full of food.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, we're going to start next year or this year with rucks with pups. So instead of carrying weight plates or random weight in a bag, we're going to donate dog food. So we're going to pack our packs full of dog food, and then we're going to work with the SPCA and the local sheriff's office and their pound and so on. And we're going to walk dogs that need to be walked, and then donate food at the end of the day. So we're going to do it in March, and then we're going to go right into our food bank ruck in April. And then we do a ruck progression series for the rest of the year. We might come up with another couple of events between now and next guide on 22, but we start with about miles and we add about 3 miles every month. So in the fall, I think before guide on 22, we did an 18-mile ruck. Before that, we did a 15-mile ruck. And so we're allowing people to kind of see if this is for them, so to speak.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's good too because people who maybe never have rucked before, if they're starting off earlier in the year and they do the 6 mile and then the 9 mile and 12, etc., all the way up to a bigger pace, they may be able to adjust to it, and they may to
And
realize
that's the
I can
idea.
actually do it.
Yeah, and that's the idea. It is interesting to see that we'll have people at the beginning of the year who start out with 3, 6, 9 miles who we don't see after 12 or 15 miles, but then we'll have people that we didn't see before 15 miles who couldn't be bothered with a 12-mile run because it's just not long enough.
Right.
So it's interesting to see that kind of cycle throughout the year. It also kind of pains me that we've got all these apps like All Trails and apps that track your route and speed and all that. I've yet to find one that's mainstream that allows you to calculate your calories burned with weight in a backpack
Mm.
because people don't realize, rucking is very niche right now. It hasn't really taken off, but it's better for you than running. You're much less prone to injury when you're walking with weight in a backpack. You're going to get in zone 2 cardio faster. You're burning more fat because you're in zone 2 cardio. So all around, it's a better athletic experience, and you can hold conversations with people, have a good time, go see some stuff, and you're not mad at yourself at the end of the day. But like I said, you're less injury prone than running. And then I talk to these people, and I'm like, "Hey, we're going to do a 22-mile ruck," and they're like, "That sounds terrible, but I got a marathon coming up in 3 months." I'm like, "That's dumb. Like, well, why are you running marathons?" It's basically the same distance.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
they're
it's only
intimidated.
a few
They're
miles
intimidated
more, but
by a couple pounds in a backpack, right? And we're saying,
right,
don't
right.
run 3 miles an hour. It's a good pace, and it's better
Yeah,
for you long term.
yeah.
But I can't wait to see a good app that comes out that calculates the calories burned because you burn so much more calories just walking with weight in a backpack.
If there's anyone out there listening to this who either knows of an app that maybe we don't know about right now, or you're an app developer and you want to go figure that out, go ahead. I'm sure you got a market right here.
It would
with,
take
with
it
some,
would take nothing. Trails, Garmin. There are plenty of apps that could just put it into their software. It could be
right.
an update next month,
And
right? But they
it's
don't
just a
feature that.
calculation, right?
It
Like,
is. It is. Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, it should be easy enough to do. Who knows? Someone might be able to throw that
Google
out there,
Fit,
but
Google Fit at the end of the day tries to tell me how calories I burned, and you're not counting the 25 pounds that was in that backpack. You know what I mean?
right, exactly. Um, so yeah. For folks who are interested in learning more about the 22 and all the things that you guys are doing, where can they go to find out more information?
Yeah, honorboundfit.com, Facebook, Instagram, all the socials. It's honorboundfit, no spaces, no periods, no nothing. It's fit, not fitness. Fit is an acronym: faith, integrity, tenacity. It's a big part of what we do. And and the Guide On Foundation will soon be guideon.org, I think.
Okay.
But always be on onfit.com.
Excellent. So I will have links to all that in the show notes for the listeners who are interested in getting involved in any of the upcoming events, in whatever capacity that they want to participate. But Rich, it's been great chatting to you again.
Yeah.
Like I said, it was great meeting you in Atlanta when we were there, and great chatting with you again today. But yeah, thanks for everything that you guys are doing, raising awareness for veteran suicides, making it personal, the work to help and raise all this awareness. It's really a great thing you guys are doing. So thanks so much.
No, thank you for you do, Scott, and helping us spread the word. And I appreciate the opportunity, man.
You bet.